I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume, so I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. So we've been reading the story of the birth of Christ. We're actually a few years after the birth of Christ now. Christ was born. We all know the nativity story. Simeon and Anna prophesy in the temple, flight into Egypt. About 6 years after the birth of Christ is when Joseph brings his family back out of Egypt into Nazareth. And that's about the time that the Nephites really start dropping off, and they just become harder and harder in their wickedness. They start rationalizing the miracles and the signs that they have seen. It was just a trick of the light. It was all done by men to fool us. Those kind of rationalizations inspired by Satan, and the people are getting harder and harder in their hearts. And a lot of the younger ones, the rising generation, are flocking to the Gadianton robbers, and we have this great wickedness developing here. And that took us to about the 11th year, or the end of the 11th year among the Nephites. So now we're going to pick it up in Luke. In this video, we have a Joseph Smith translation. Now what the Joseph Smith translation is, this is a translation or correction done by Joseph Smith to restore those passages that have been lost or corrupted over the years. In Luke chapter 2, we're going to finish this chapter out, starting in verse 40. And the child grew and waxed strong in spirit, filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. Now his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem after the custom of the feast. And when they had fulfilled the days, as they returned, the child Jesus tarried behind in Jerusalem, and Joseph and his mother knew not of it. But they, supposing him to have been in the company, went a day's journey, and they sought him among their kinsfolk and acquaintance. And when they found him not, they turned back again to Jerusalem, seeking him. And it came to pass that after 3 days they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the doctors, both hearing them and asking them questions. And all that heard him were astonished at his understanding and answers. And when they saw him, they were amazed. And his mother said unto him, Son, why hast thou thus dealt with us? Behold, thy father and I have sought thee sorrowing. And he said unto them, How is it that ye sought me? Wist ye not that I must be about my father's business? And they understood not the saying which he spake unto them. And he went down with them and came to Nazareth, and was subject unto them. But his mother kept all these sayings in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and stature, and in favor with God and man. I think this is a very famous story among most Christians. Now, the one thing that doesn't make any sense is why he's asking the doctors and lawyers. Why is he asking the questions? Matthew already told us that no man could teach him. Of course, that was in the Joseph Smith translation, but it doesn't make sense. And then, it says that he's asking them questions, and then they marvel at his answers. There's a little confusion there. Remember, he's 12 years old now. So this is about the time in the Nephites, they were getting harder and harder in their hearts. They're falling in. This is near the time of the great war between the Gadianton robbers and the Nephites, which we will read about shortly. But they come down for the Passover, which is an 8-day festival. That's what it means by when the days were fulfilled. They came down for the entire thing. And it wasn't just them, it was a company. Their family and friends were all coming together as a group, and they were all going back to Nazareth as a group. And that's why they didn't bother looking for him, because they just figured he was with the rest of the group. When they don't find him, they return. The rest of the company apparently kept going. They returned to Jerusalem. Christ, I don't think, purposely stayed behind. I think he got caught up talking in the temple. He got into a religious debate and lost track of time. That took them 3 days to find him. I don't think they expected him to be in the temple. They were looking with their family. They were looking with friends. They were saying, these are the people we generally stay with when we're here. This is the places we generally go to. They were going to the usual places. They weren't expecting him at the temple. When they found him, his response, Wist you not that I must be about my father's business? It says they don't understand that. I'm not sure, but this seems to be the first time that he's actually getting into one of these discussions, and it's something that they weren't expecting. We're going to leave it there, but before we sign off, we do want to look at the Joseph Smith translation. Minor grammatical corrections. Instead of among their kinsfolk in verse 44, Joseph Smith renders it as sought him among his kindred. So they sought him among those that he would normally be hanging out with. His friends, his cousins, his brothers, the people that he would have been with. And the rest of it really does seem to be primarily grammatical changes, but the one very important one right here, as I mentioned, is it doesn't make sense that he was asking the question. So it says here in verse 46, came to pass that after 3 days they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the doctors, both hearing them and asking them questions. Joseph Smith corrects this. Came to pass after 3 days they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the doctors, and they were hearing him and asking him questions. And all who heard him were astonished. Definitely clears up that confusion. They were astonished at his answers because they were asking him questions, and he was answering them. And he was giving them answers in wisdom and judgment that was astounding in a 12-year-old boy. Now the doctors, these would have been the lawyers, the rabbis, those who have studied the law and the scriptures as they live as a profession. That's what they do. And there was a lot of debate between rabbis on how to interpret certain things. And that's why they're asking him questions. And he is answering them better than any of the doctors ever could. But let us leave it there, and we will return to 3rd Nephi, because after this event in the temple, we don't have anything about Christ's life until his ministry, when he's 30 years old, or maybe just before he's 30 years old, but around there. So we're going to return to 3rd Nephi and read what is going on among the Nephites during the next 18 years of Christ's life. So I will see you there.